It's Wednesday evening. You're listening to Mystic Moon Cafe with Wendy Schindler and Travis Short. Every week, we will interview guests that are experts in various fields of the supernatural, paranormal, unexplained, and esoteric. So sit back and let us take you on a journey to educate, enlighten, and entertain as we broaden your horizons. Now, here's your hosts, Wendy Schindler and Travis Short.
Well, honestly, it's just me, Wendy Schindler, this evening. I thought that, something told me to go ahead and replay our Sunday show from August 13th. It was Richard Estep and Vanessa Mitchell, Spirits of the Cage, True Accounts of a Haunted Medieval Prison, over in St. Osyth, Essex, England. Anyway, you don't want to listen to me, you want to hear the show. There were a couple places where the line connection was a bit spotty, but we were covering several different time zones, so please bear with us if through that, but most of it's really good. Definitely worth a listen. And, well, have a good evening listening.
It's Wednesday evening. You're listening to Mystic Moon Cafe with Wendy Schindler and Travis Short. Every week, we will interview guests that are experts in various fields of the supernatural, paranormal, unexplained, and esoteric. So sit back and let us take you on a journey to educate, enlighten, and entertain as we broaden your horizons. Now, here's your hosts, Wendy Schindler and Travis Short.
And good morning. Well, it's morning here in Kansas City. Travis is
It's morning. It's midday in Virginia, and that's still like morning on a Sunday for me. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm glad I could be here to, help and encourage and bring you up out of bed and everything.
So awesome. Thank you. One of the 2 days I get to sleep uninterrupted until I choose to wake up. And what does Wendy have us do? Schedule a show on Sunday at midday.
Well, of course I did.
Oh, it's very strange, too. I'm drinking coffee.
Yes.
That is not normally my choice of drink for this program.
Oh, well.
It's very odd. I keep taking a drink going, that's not Pinot Noir. That's not Scotch. What is this strange taste?
Ah, well.
Oh, my gosh. There's a first time for everything.
Yes, there is. Always, right?
Absolutely. So how are things been going?
You sound better. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, that's fine. I am feeling much better, thank you. It's this past week was rough. I haven't had a head cold like that in some time. It just really, of course, it also sucks getting older. It just takes me longer to recuperate. It really ticks me. Of course, I also refuse to see doctors. That doesn't help. But it's much better. Sore throat is gone. Have a little bit of a cough still. A little bit of a kind of a scratchiness to my voice. But other than that, I'm doing really well. Of course, my daughter is now sick. My office manager's sick. And we think we've traced it back to her grandson. He came by the office a week ago this past Thursday because he had been sent home from daycare because he wasn't feeling well. And so he was running around the office, coughing and sneezing all over everything. But he ended up still, as of yesterday, or not yesterday, but as of Friday, was still not back in school because he has strep, bronchitis, and something else.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to blame him.
Yes, we're going to blame him.
Little carpet muncher, ankle biter, rug rat person.
Well, as long as that's how you really feel about it.
I'm trying not to hold anything back this morning.
Don't hold back. Yeah, don't hold back.
I'm trying not to. You may discover you don't like me on a morning show.
Well, you never know.
Not exactly a morning person. Oh, how about you? How are things in Kansas City?
Well, the sun is shining. It's about 70 degrees. It's actually really, really nice today.
Well, it's supposed to be nice here. We had basically Thursday, Friday, and Saturday was just torrential rains. I didn't even get to see the meteor shower.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's been a little cloudy, and then by the time I'd remember, it'd be 1 or 2 in the morning. I thought, I'm not going outside. Here, this close to the city, like I live, there's just too many lights around to really get a good see on the sky at night.
Yeah. Well, we don't have the lighting problem here, but we do have the, like I said, the weather was just horrible. So.
Darn it
anyway. That was my weekend. Great fun stories, right? No,
right.
Not so much.
Ooh, okay. I'm sorry, I was looking through my contacts, and I know that I had one of our guests queued up to go, but now I'm not seeing it.
They disappeared.
It disappeared on me. How dare it? That's just rude.
Just wait till your co-host disappears on you. That's even more rude.
Oh no, I found it. It's because it but like I say, different computer, different setup. It just put it down the way a little bit. All right, and I don't know what. Are you there? Call to Travis Short. Okay, that's what we're doing. All right, never mind. Sorry about that. Anyway, meanwhile, back at the ranch.
Yeah, you've got me on here.
Yes, I do. Well, I'm still waking up too, so there. Well, I'm sorry that your office manager's son is so sick, and gosh darn it. And then all the rest of you. All y'all. Isn't that how you say that?
All y'all. Y'all. Yes, all y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Which actually is redundant. All you all is kind of redundant, but we do say that here. Yes.
Right, yeah.
We say a lot of weird things here. We could do a whole...
Sorry?
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I caught Vanjie's live feed video last night. I don't know if you saw that she had done that or not.
I did not. I was watching movies with my daughter. We watched Sinister, and then she fell asleep, and then I went ahead and watched Sinister 2 until I fell asleep.
Well.
Yeah. Now, was Vanjie addressing the idiot rampage that went on in Charlottesville yesterday?
Yes, she was, yeah.
Yes. I kept getting messages yesterday, people who know I'm in Virginia going, are you safe? Is everything okay? I'm like, I'm safe. I'm fine. I'm as far away from Charlottesville as you can be and still be in the same state.
Right, yeah.
Because Charlottesville, Virginia is like 6 hours from where I am.
Oh, my. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm like, so I said, so safe and sound, just, tired of watching these idiots. And I respect everyone's freedom of speech, First Amendment rights. I do not have a problem. If you want to gather and march around in your, homemade cosplay outfit for recognition of, Nazis and racists and bigots, that's fine. You can do that. But don't show up causing all kinds of problems and running over people with your car. And
that's just rude.
It is.
To say the least, right?
It's very, very rude. It is very rude. And, I'm torn, and I've made this statement. I am very torn about this whole thing of removing Confederate statues or statues of Confederate soldiers, because you can't undo our history. That is part of American history.
Right.
You can't erase the fact that there was
the conflict.
There at one time there was a conflict, and you cannot. You just can't erase all of that. It reminds me of that scene from one of my favorite movies, Thank You for Smoking, with Aaron Eckhart and William H. Macy and Robert Duvall. It's a great movie, and Eckhart plays a PR person for Big Tobacco. Okay. And it's a very tongue-in-cheek, dark comedy, if you haven't seen it. Very worth it, though. Very powerful indictment on our pop culture. And it's got some great lines in it. One of my favorite lines is actually, I have it posted to my Facebook page. It's one of my quotes that I like to associate with. And that is Aaron Eckhart's character, at the end of the movie, is wrapping up and summing up his life. And he's like, in life, we're defined by many things. Michael Jordan plays basketball. Charles Manson kills people. I talk for a living. And that's just one of those great lines that I love. But at the end of the movie, you have this liberal politician who's decided he's going to rewrite history by going into all of the classic movies, the black and whites and the ones from the 60s and 70s, and remove cigarettes from everyone. He's digitally putting in their hands like party favors and licorice sticks and lollipops and all of this.
Very unrealistic and dumb.
Very, and one of the, and he's being interviewed by a reporter, and she says, "Don't you think you're changing history?" And he's like, "No, I like to think I'm making history better."
Okay. Yes, as the authors of their stories like to do.
Exactly. So, but I think gigantic, Evel Knievel jump of reason, logic, and making a segue here. However, that does kind of tie in with part of the program today, dealing with the witch hunts, the witch trials, and things that took place not only in this country but in England and in Europe, as we're going to be talking about. You can't really remove that from our history. You can't say that didn't happen, because it did.
Right. And there you are.
I'm getting down off my soapbox.
It's okay. We all have them to get up on. I shouldn't have brought up the Vanjie coming on Facebook Live last night. She scolded me because I made her laugh.
Yes, I did miss that last night. I wasn't on. I actually didn't have my laptop on until very late last night when I turned it on to watch Netflix as I was going to sleep. When one of those things when you spend every day in front of a computer doing social media for the radio station, for myself, for Vanjie, it's just like I don't really want to see a computer screen.
You're extremely lucky to have me then, because I troll it all day long, for
yes,
our show and
but
stuff.
You do, and let me know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen this? No, I haven't. Thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Open your eyes, man! Open your eyes!
Ignorance is bliss, Wendy. Ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance in an age of information is a choice.
And it's all just fake news.
Oh, let's don't go there. Please, let's don't. Anyway, meanwhile, well, I guess we can, I can play our song, and while that's happening, if you want to bring on our guests, that would be most excellent.
Okay, so I'm going to be in the audio green room.
You'll be in the audio green room, and I will try to get the people on. I think it shows the screen, and you can see that too, but I'm not positive on that.
What about color an audio green room is, since you can't see it?
The white noise room.
I like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to be in the white noise room. Okay, cool.
Damn,
that works.
I'm gonna roll this morning, huh?
You are. See, this is why I'm no good in the morning.
Alrighty. You are banished to the white noise room for just a few moments.
I'm heading right now.
We'll play John Fogerty's Wicked Old Witch, just for the fun of it, since we're doing Spirits of the Cage.
Cool.
Okay.
Love
Talk to you in
Fogerty.
a minute.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, way down yonder in the deep blue harbor. Yeah, way back in the swamp where the snakes go crawling. Shriveled old lady with a tombstone mouth, scaring up trouble at the haunted house. Flying across the moon on a big old stick. Everybody prayed of the wicked old witch. When the sun goes down and the moon get high, you can hear her cackling out in the night. Well, the sinners and gamblers and gunslingers too, everybody scatter when the wind begin to howl. You can bet that old swamp witch is out on the prowl. Creatures and goblins and spooks all around, making their way up the road to town. Flying across the moon on a big old stag. Everybody paid up wicked old witch.
Seconds. Okay, and that was John Fogerty's The Wicked Old Witch, taking us way back for a song. How'd you do, Travis? How are you guys doing?
Well, I've got Richard with me, I think. Richard, are you still here?
I am.
Okay, Richard is still here. We dropped Vanessa.
Oh, okay.
And I just texted you. That's probably, that evil laugh is me texting you.
That's exactly what that evil laugh is.
Saying we lost Vanessa.
We lost
So
Vanessa.
we'll need to get, yeah.
Okay. Let me.
We need to try to get her back.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've encountered this before. I'm not sure I can, but she can probably call in. Oh, she's there. Hello?
Oh, okay, she's back.
Went totally blank then for ages. Right,
Well,
I
and
can
I
hear
was-
you now. I don't know what happened. It just went totally blank.
I hate
Hello?
when those
Yeah, I'm not
things
sure.
happen.
Yeah, we're not sure. I thought we had totally dropped your call. I apologize.
Right. Again, there that minute, so I don't know what's going on this end.
Well, thank you for joining us this morning, your afternoon, early evening, your time.
Just today, we'll
Well-
just say thanks for joining us Sunday. It solves the problem. We don't have to choose time zones.
There you go. There you go. That works well.
But we do have Richard Estep and Vanessa Mitchell on the phone with us. We've had Richard on several times, and it's good to have him back on the show. Richard, thank you for being back with us.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to come back and talk with you guys.
And Vanessa, we welcome you for the first time of what we hope to be many discussions with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it.
So, now, the two of you have written a book, and I'm going to do this kind of intro a little bit, and then we'll let Wendy, you can pick off with the first question, and we'll just kind of bounce off back and forth. And Richard had an idea while we were in the white noise room
Yes.
that if it's just a general question, we allow Vanessa to answer first, and then he will follow. If it's a specific question, we need to address it to that. Vanessa, would you like to go? Would you like to address this? And then she will, and then Richard will come on and give his perspective.
Very good plan, and
So-
he has suggested that before.
Yes. So love the idea.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. The title of the book is Spirits of the Cage, True Accounts of Living in a Haunted Medieval Prison. It's by Richard Estep and Vanessa Mitchell. It's by Llewellyn Publishing, and it is available September 2017, so here in just a couple of months, the publication date. Llewellyn is a great publishing company. I've worked with them before many times, actually represented one of their clients for a couple of years, helped get publicity for them, schedule interviews and things like that. Richard is in Boulder, Colorado. He first got involved in the paranormal in 1995 in the UK after attending an overnight investigation at the infamous St. Botolph's Skidbrook Church. He spent the next 5 years investigating the haunted hamlets of Great Britain as a member of Andrew Wright's Leicester-based team. Richard co-founded Boulder Counter Paranormal Research, BCPRS, with his wife Laura after relocating to the U.S. in 1999. Vanessa Mitchell in Essex, UK, is a sales worker who lived in a haunted cottage known as the Cage from 2004 till 2016. After being driven out of the cage by violent ghosts and paranormal phenomena, she co-wrote Spirits of the Cage with Richard. So thank you both for being on today to address Spirits of the Cage. And so, Wendy,
okay,
I'll let you lead.
All right, well, I'll go on with some questions. I had them written down. Here we are. Oh, Vanessa, I was curious. Do you still own the property, or were you finally able to sell it to another prospective hauntee?
No, I've still got it. It's still up for sale.
Mm-hmm. Oh dear.
It hasn't sold, so I've still got it.
Have you had many
yes.
any bites or very many people actually genuinely interested in buying it?
No. I think
I'm sorry.
I think at the end, all the easiest move for sale, I've had one person looking, but it needs to be sold to the right person. So the right person will come and buy it. But it's obviously a very unusual house and now a very famous house. And not everyone's going to want to live in a house like that, and I understand that. So hopefully, somebody will want to buy it for a business, or just so they can say they own the most haunted house in the UK. I think there'd be a millionaire out there somewhere that would want to buy it just so they, to add to their collection.
Sure. Curiosity.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to ask a very pragmatic question. Is the real estate market slowly? Does it move slowly there in the UK like it does here in the US sometimes? Could that possibly be an explanation for the problem selling it?
No, I just think it's been up for sale for so many years. I just think it's the nature of the house.
Okay.
I don't think it's anything to do with the market at all. The market's quite speedy here. There aren't any longs in it. It's just the house. It's just a very haunted house. It's an unusual property, and you're not going to really buy it to want to live in it. Somebody might, but it wouldn't be the usual. You wouldn't have kids in there or anything like that. I wouldn't really recommend it.
You tried that
pieces
yourself
of advice
and didn't work well, right?
Yeah, I tried that. It didn't work very well, yeah. It's someone very brave who wants to buy it.
So, Richard, when did you first take notice of the Cage, and how did you get involved? Obviously, because you were still in Colorado, so you actually made a special trip back to the UK to do this investigation.
Yeah, I did. I saw this show on television, which covered the Cage. Vanessa gave a tour of the house and talked about its backstory, and I was fascinated. I was fascinated with the history of the location, with its connection to witchcraft trials, and just the historic nature of the place. And so I thought I'd see if I could make contact with Vanessa, and said, I'd love to come spend some time in a place like this and research it. And she very happily said, you should come over, you should come spend some time here and see what you can find out. And that's how it came to be. It was about 6 months later that I ended up getting on a plane to go do just that.
Now, you, Richard, have traveled fairly extensively around the world investigating haunted locations. One of the programs that we had you on the very first time, and then we did a follow-up, was Asylum 49 there in Utah with my friend Cammie and her husband. And so, you've had experiences in lots of haunted locations. On a scale of 1 to 10, as far as, haunting factor, where would you put the Cage?
Well, I've got to rank it twice, and the reason is that I spent a week there, and Vanessa spent years of her life there. So the odds of going in and getting like a 10 out of 10 experience yourself are never actually that high. But we did get some good activity inside the Cage. Also, talked to a lot of witnesses that have had the most incredible experiences there, and Vanessa has also put a lot of their stories in the book. So I think if you look at the Cage as a big picture, you've got to put it right up there as a 9 out of 10 for sure. My week there, I would put it as more of a 5 or a 6, which, most locations are a 1 or a 2. So I feel very lucky to have had the experiences I did in the cage.
And we are very excited to hear about some of those experiences here in the course of this show. So we're very, very excited. I have to say, the book was, and of course I have a proof copy. It's uncorrected and things like that. But I'm saying it's probably one of the best investigative journal-type books that I've read in a very long time.
Yeah, the same.
Oh, thanks for it.
Yes.
Thank you.
It was,
we wanted to tell Vanessa's story, and it really is Vanessa's story, interwoven with my investigation. So we came at it from two perspectives.
And I liked that approach. I really did. It was very much getting inside Vanessa's head while you were investigating. It was kind of, hearing you talk about the investigation. And you do a lot of the typical setup, talking about the process of what goes on, the way that you choose your team, which I do want to talk about because I think you chose an interesting team for this particular investigation, and I do want to talk about that. But the process, some of the habits, some of the protocol that you go through, which can be for even people who are interested in the paranormal. You're going, oh, come on, get to the real good stuff. Go, I don't want to see this. I know what you do. But you pace it in such a way, and you tell the story in such a way that you do interweave while you're explaining it. It's almost like you get a snapshot into Vanessa's time there, into Vanessa's head, hearing her story. So it really is almost like sitting down for, in a pub or at a restaurant and hearing two people tell the same story from their own individual perspective. So very conversational.
Thank you.
And very informative and very entertaining. Like I said, it was one of my favorite books in quite some time.
It's really nice to hear that, and I had a great time in the cage. I always remind myself, though, that Vanessa didn't. For me and my team, it was an adventure. We got to travel and we got to visit this haunted location and basically live there. For Vanessa, though, it was years of misery and fear and terror, and I think the book, her push into the book, conveyed that really well.
Yes, it did quite well. Vanessa, would you tell us what was your scariest moment there? When did you feel most threatened, maybe, or you and your child, either one?
To be honest, all the time in there was scary and threatening. There were quite a lot of occasions that were worse than others, but it was an everyday situation there. It was every day. There wasn't really any respite to it at all. When I had my son, which was the last kind of 7-8 months in the cage, that was worse because, of course, I'm trying to protect a baby. I knew the house wasn't safe, and I knew I couldn't really, I couldn't do anything about it. So it was definitely worse. The last months I spent there. I actually the last months I was living completely in my bedroom. I had just totally locked myself in my bedroom. I had abandoned the rest of the house completely. So I'd come in from work straight up to the bedroom and just stay in that room. I lived in one room for months. Hello?
Oh yes, I'm here. You cut out just a little bit, but we can hear you.
Right. Okay. Oh, okay. All right.
Okay. Are the rest of you here with me?
I'm with you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear.
Yes.
Okay, good. Just making sure. Sorry, Toby keeps piping up in the background too, so there's a little dog barking in the distance. A little bit of dog barking because all the dogs are big. Okay. Let me go back here. Now, Ursula Kemp was one of the first witches thrown in there. Is that correct? Back in 1582?
Did we lose Vanessa?
Yeah,
okay.
She was alone with Joseph, and she was in there. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yep, we sure can. long distance
right.
between us. Sorry about that. I think there might be just a little lag time, so we're thinking we lose each other.
Okay.
Anyway, now she was horribly, horribly mistreated in there, and as all of the accused witches were, I'm sure. Did she visit often? And if you think it was her, was that a more a less threatening type of presence, or was at that point was it all extremely? It was just too much for her?
Okay. Well, no, I woman. That was her. I suspect it was, but I was sitting in the front room, and she walked through from the prison room, and which is the adjoining room, and I was actually sitting on the floor, and she walked over to me, and she was holding a bowl. It was like an oval wooden bowl, and all I could see was some type of leaves or potpourri or something in the bowl, and she put her hand in, and she sprinkled whatever this was over my head. Now, I didn't feel scared at all. She actually felt, this particular spirit felt very nice and warm and almost comforting. Looking back now, I believe that she did it as some sort of protection or something like that. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. But no, when I saw her, she didn't make me feel bad or scared at all. I was just stunned, and it was during the day, mm-hmm. and I was just watching her, and it was actually a nice feeling, if anything. You know, I definitely think that was to do with a little bit of her letting me know that she was there, and as if trying to give me some sort of protection from what was to come.
Very nice. I'm glad she could offer that little bit of comfort to you.
Yeah, yeah.
She didn't have an easy time.
No, absolutely.
Right. Would you like to tell us her story?
Well, she was a local woman. She lived in the village of St. Joseph, and she was a healer. And she made potions for the village folk, and they went to her for help all the time. One lady in particular went to her for help, and Ursula agreed. And she wanted her to cure her lameness and her sick child. So Ursula did that. And when she asked for the payment, the lady said no, she wasn't paying Ursula. So there was nothing Ursula could do. She went back to Ursula again a while later and said, you know, she needed more help, which Ursula again agreed to do. And again, a second time she refused to pay her. So Ursula said, well, can you pay me in cheese? And the woman again refused. There was a big argument between Ursula and the woman. And not long after this, the woman's baby fell from the cot and died. It was then that the woman accused Ursula of being a witch. And it was then that she was arrested by Lord Darcy, who owned St. Joseph Priory in the village. So she was accused of witchcraft. And when she was accused and captured, she also basically said, well, it's not just me, there's 12 other women that were doing it. The evidence was stacked against her because they actually captured her son as well, Tom, who was about 6 at the time. Oh. And he had to stand trial and say, yes, my mother is a witch. I've seen her with her familiars. I've seen her feeding them blood. Because, of course, he was a little boy and they would have threatened him with his life and he had no choice. So it was actually her own son that partly went to having her hung.
Oh, gosh.
But she was, it's the most...
Cutting out a bit on us.
It's the most documented case because everything all through the trial, so all her trial and all her initial interviews were all actually written down. They're on Google, so we actually know from start to finish what happened to her. The only thing we don't know is where her body is. That's the only thing we don't know after she was hung. She was hung and 2 other women. Some of the other women died in prison, and a couple of them weren't found guilty. But yeah, it's a very, very sad story. We don't know what happened to her son after this. But of course, in those days, unless there was family to look after him, he would have been left on the streets, especially with a mother who was a convicted witch. I don't know if it had lasted long after that.
Yeah, I would imagine not, but golly, you can always hope. But then again, maybe the kinder thing was for him to join his mom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, was there a child's
With
presence
her on
there at
EVP,
all? Oh, sorry. Okay. All right, you're up, Travis.
Well, I was going to do we still have Vanessa, or did we lose her?
I think she's still there.
Okay. Maybe not. Vanessa, can you hear me? Don't think so.
Okay.
Richard, let me address this one to you until maybe we seem to be having a serious connection issue with Vanessa. Now, you had said that you first saw the story about Spirits of the Cage on a UK haunted locations program.
Yes.
What in particular made this story out of? I'm assuming it was almost an anthology type thing like they do here in the U.S. Maybe not, but what made the Cage's story intrigue you so much?
Well, it was a show that I believe you can see on Netflix here in America. It's called Great British Ghosts, and the idea of the show was that they had a lady who used to be a children's TV presenter go visit some of Britain's most haunted locations. And there was no investigation. You know, this wasn't we're going to lock you in the dark and film you with a camera. It was a show where they basically just told the stories and interviewed the witnesses, which to me was a very refreshing kind of show to watch. There was no drama, no screaming. And as the story unfolded and the events were documented, things that had happened inside the cage, I just found the appeal of it growing. You had a case which was several hundred years worth of history, all tied up in one building. It was a location that was fairly small, and therefore it could be easily controlled by a team of investigators, as opposed to, some of the big sprawling locations I've been to where you could put a battalion of people on the ground and still not cover everything. The cage is surprisingly small. So it seemed like the ideal, I hate to say playground, but how about research lab? For me to
that works
for me to get my hands on and see what I could see.
Now, did kind of a parenthetical question? Did the size of the cage, its smallness, did that add to the claustrophobic and the fear when things started happening?
I wouldn't say that it was claustrophobic. It was small but not cramped. See, the cage itself is as big as most, I would say, bathrooms. That's the cage itself. It's a very small.
Oh my!
Recently, they built a house around it, so it's at the end of a long row of houses. We would call them townhomes here in the U.S. Houses that are all connected. But the cage itself, the original structure, is basically one single room. And you could just about... It wasn't necessarily claustrophobic, but having heard Vanessa's experiences and those of her friends and family members, that definitely predisposes you towards a few...
Travis, have we lost them?
Well, I'm not sure. I had Richard.
Okay. All right. I can hear Vanessa in the background.
Richard?
She's back.
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we're having a serious problem today. I'm not sure why with the connectivity.
Mercury's
We haven't had this
retrograde.
I guess we haven't had this much problem in several months with connectivity.
Right.
Now,
It's probably talking about the cage, that's why. The bad.
Yeah.
I wasn't even going to recommend that as an option, but I'm glad someone did. So,
Shoo.
So,
well, you know,
Burn
we've got at
some
least
sage.
we've got at least one, and I think this is in the book. We had one instance of technology going kind of haywire in the cage. I don't know if you recall reading it, but my laptop,
Yes.
which I'd taken with me, and I've written quite a few books on it, and it's always behaved perfectly. Went haywire went in the cage, and I was actually outside meeting with Vanessa across the street, and I got a call from one of my fellow investigators, a text saying, are you connected remotely into your laptop? Because I'd left it inside the cage building itself on the table, so inside the actual cage, the brick structure. And we keep a log, so whenever something unusual happens, whether it's a door slamming or an EMF spike, the idea is that you enter that into the log and you put a timestamp on it. It helps keep an accurate record, for writing up the investigation afterwards. Well, it turned out that somebody or somehow that log was being scrolled through. It was a Microsoft Word file, and it was as though somebody were going through it line by line, moving the cursor downwards, reading what had been written. And we actually have video footage of that happening. So my colleagues who were still in the cage said, hey, you connected into this? Are you somehow remotely connected, showing Vanessa the log? And I said, no. In fact, we don't have internet connectivity inside the cage. So my laptop was completely disconnected from any kind of outside signal. Never done it before, never done it since.
Well, now, Richard, also one of the very first things that happened when you guys were there was technological in one aspect, is that both you and Stephen had digital recorders that picked up an EVP, but one picked up more of the EVP than another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Stephen is a fellow paranormal investigator here in America. He also happens to be a Catholic priest. And I took him along with me. Number one, he was crazy enough to say, yes, I'll get on a plane and go 5,000 miles to spend a week in prison with you. And number two, anybody that can say a paramedic and a paranormal investigator and a priest go into a haunted prison, that's got to be a setup for the best joke ever.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
You know? So Stephen very graciously agreed to do that, and we've been in the cage no more than 10 minutes. Vanessa had agreed to give us a tour, and I'm sure she won't mind me telling you she doesn't like to be inside the building, and she won't go there after dark if it's all possible. So we went there early in the afternoon, and she said, I'll give you a quick guided tour, and I'll give you the keys, and I'm leaving. Good luck. So
there.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yes.
So we get a bit of a tour. We go through downstairs. That takes about 5 or 6 minutes. We go upstairs, up the top landing, and it's unfortunate that at the top of the staircase is where a former owner of the cage had taken his own life by hanging, right up there on the top landing. Mm-hmm. And it was quite dark up there because this is England in January, so it was very, very gray and gloomy and dark, even in the afternoon with sunlight.
Sure.
So I'd asked Vanessa if there was a light up there, and we got a most interesting response on the EVP recorders. I was carrying a handheld digital voice recorder. Stephen was wearing one on a bracelet. So we were both standing in the same area at the same time. The only 3 people in the building were Stephen, myself, and Vanessa. And a fourth voice appeared on the recording, and I think you have that to play for your listeners.
Yes,
right, Travis?
I think we do. So Wendy, we've got the perfect setup for us. Let's go ahead and play that EVP.
Okay, you all won't be able to hear it. I'll start it right now and let you know when it's done.
Sounds good. So do you have lights up here?
Yeah. Around you, Steve. Yeah.
There's the other.
So do you have lights up here?
Yeah. Just behind you, Steve.
It's very soft, and I can't really turn it up any louder, but I hope the audience could hear that it says, yes, in the bathroom. bathroom. Now, I had a question about that. I know that there are different terms for the bathroom between here in the U.S. and over on your side of the world. Would it have been a more recent voice to know bathroom, or would that be a common term for older spirits, entities to know?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure of the answer, to be honest.
Okay.
I don't know what they called hundreds of years ago a bathroom. Well, they didn't have bathrooms, did they, hundreds of years ago? There wouldn't have been one.
Right. So it's possible the intelligent haunting could have picked up bathroom from, golly, your own thoughts or modes of speech.
I mean, there's spirits in there from generations, many generations, from Victorian times, from even sooner. So it's very possible it could have been someone who'd lived there literally, 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago.
Right.
The interesting thing about the cages, when I left the house, I managed to get all the deeds of the house from hundreds of years ago, which I'd never had before because one of the previous owners had kept them.
Oh, neat.
Now, what we found out was that the house for the last 300 years has been up for sale on average every 3.5 years. I'm the second longest person ever to have owned it. One man brought the house for £150 and sold it weeks later for 100. Now, of course, in those days, £50 would have been 50 grand now. So it's had many owners, and none of them stay longer than 3.5 years. None of them. A lot of them were 6 months, 8 months, very short periods of time. And obviously I know the reason for that, because I only managed to live in the house for 3 years, although I've owned it now since 2004. But myself, I only managed 3 years in there. So it's seen many people live there and leave.
Goodness. Now, have you ever been able to talk to any of the previous owners? Obviously not the man who committed suicide, but or maybe you have talked to him more. But have you been able to talk to them and ask what they may have experienced, or if they experienced anything? Or
well, some people who lived there when I was younger, I never spoke to them personally. My friend knew them very well. And she said they had terrible trouble in the house. They were downstairs one day, and there was a bookshelf upstairs in the top hallway, the landing, and there was a massive crash one night, and they all ran upstairs, and every book had been flung from the shelf. She had also said that she was lying in bed, and a child got in bed with her, as if getting in bed for a cuddle. I've heard a lot of things about the house. But more so later, actually, after I left the house. I think if I'd have heard it all before I brought it, I probably wouldn't have brought it.
Right.
But the people moved away. I mean, a lot of them have died, actually. So people were killed in car crashes there, divorces, cancer, early deaths. The house is just a bad house, and nobody stays there long. As I say, I'm the second longest owner in the history that we have to have owned it. The thing is, in England, there is only 7 cages left in the whole of the UK. These little village prisons, over the years, they've all been demolished and they all built on or something. There's only 7 left. So it's a very rare bit of history anyway, the house. But there's, it just goes to show when people can't stay there, not everyone is mad. I'm not saying I'm mad. I know the skeptics out there poo-hoo it. But you can't poo-hoo that. You can't poo-hoo fact that for nearly 300 years, people don't stay in that house. That's for the skeptics out there. You cannot deny that.
No. Not even the most skeptical can deny something is up there. Right.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I lost my train of thought. Travis?
Well, exactly. When Wendy loses her train of thought, I can't even speak this morning. Her train of thought, she calls on me as like the lifesaver. So it's like, ask something. No, I told her I'm not used to these daytime shows. We do these things from 9 to 11 o'clock at night. I'm drinking coffee for this show. That's never my drink of choice when we do this program. It's always something a little more, alcoholic. It's a little difficult to focus. Richard, I want to come back to you, and this is actually working really well. Wendy's getting to the heart of Vanessa's perspective on the story, so I'm coming back to you as the investigator. You put together a very unique team in some ways, very Anglo-centric in one way, but very unique because you have you and Stephen, who are seasoned professionals, and then you brought in individuals who had never really been on a paranormal investigation. That's a kind of a unique approach, especially for something as unique as the cage. What was the rationale behind the diverse background of your investigative team?
Well, the main reason bringing in Caroline and Leslie was that Leslie makes a mean cup of tea. No, I just did that so that she's got a reason to slap me when I see her for our next investigation in February. There were actually a number of levels to this. So Stephen and I, having done this now for decades, we have a lot of experience, but we also bring our own biases, which is, undeniable. It's something that you can't get around, no matter how professional you try to be. You bring your own biases towards an investigation. So bringing in two people that had never done this before brought fresh perspectives. The other interesting thing, too, was that most of the inmates of the cage, Vanessa will correct me if I'm wrong, were women. So, going in with a team of male investigators is probably not the best choice. So we wanted a couple of females who were enthusiastic and willing to learn and get involved, which Caroline and Leslie were excellent at doing. Unbiased, fresh perspective, and also female. So we thought there would be some empathy there with some of the former inmates of the cage, of the witches' prison. And it did make for a diverse team. And we had quite a few interesting experiences, both the professionals and the newbies alike.
Well, it's interesting because whenever I was reading and you were talking about bringing on two individuals who had never been really even interested in the paranormal necessarily, but had never gone on an investigation, my immediate reaction was going to be, well, then they're going to think everything that goes on is paranormal. Any noise, any bump.
Yep. And that's a very valid concern, and that's why Stephen and I were there in order to say, no, hold on a minute. Sometimes this is just an old structure settling down at night when it cools. Sometimes this is a heating pipe, So, again, we sought that yin and that yang, that balance. And some of the experiences, a good case in point would be when the door slammed itself. We spent a good 30 minutes trying to debunk how a heavy door, which is shielded on a non-windy day, decides to slam itself. And we would jump up and down. We would use pieces of paper to track air currents to see if there was somehow a strong breeze coming through the house, all those kind of things. And they brought ideas that it was a successful enough team up that we're doing it again. We're all going to prison again in February in Cornwall to Bodmin Jail.
You're
nice.
Cutting out a lot. Or was it just me?
Okay, let me
No,
say
there's
that
a-
again.
There we go. Okay.
I don't know how much got through.
You had tried the door.
Slamming. And,
Right. Okay. I
Yeah.
think you might have been going into your investigation at the Clink, but I'm not positive on that.
No, I was saying that it was a successful enough event with the full sets of perspectives, two that were seasoned paranormal investigators, two that were relatively new. We're going to do it all again. We're going back to jail in February, Bodmin Prison in Cornwall, for a week to see, to investigate the hanging ground there, and we'll be inmates of that particular prison to see if we can get some interesting results.
Well, that sounds like I'm going to say fun, but fun is a relative term, I suppose. There. Very nice, though.
It's probably not a normal thing to want to go spend your holiday in prison, is it? But
not generally.
But to me, if the story is good, if the story is fascinating, that's how I do like to spend time. Just talking to Vanessa about her experiences and what happened to her in the cage, I really love the opportunity to bring that to a wider audience. And the truth is, we all love scary movies.
Yes.
The attraction of a good scary movie is, of course, you're completely safe. You're not really going to be traumatized.
Right.
Well, Vanessa, the readers of this book will get that experience that Vanessa lived through without having to actually live through it themselves. And I think it will cause more than a few sleepless nights.
Very possible.
Yeah, I agree, because and I've been very, very careful in the book not to exaggerate and not to embellish anything. Everything that I wrote in the book, now, some of it seems fantastical, I understand that, but it's absolutely true, and it happened. All of it happened. In fact, it's not all even in the book. There's stuff that happened that's not in the book, but it's especially the latter years of owning the cage. But it was literally like living in a horror movie. It absolutely was, and it was so terrifying on a daily basis. There, it's I don't know, but it truly was. So I hope the readers, will get a sense of that, and I'm sure that they will.
Vanessa, would you tell us about your first encounter with the Shadow Man?
Well, that was the first day. I was unpacking, getting my stuff out of the car, and my flatmate, I've got a friend, Nicole, she moved in with me there for a year or so, and I was making a cup of tea, and I told Nicole I was making tea, and I heard something behind me, and I thought it was her coming for the tea. I turned around, and when she didn't answer me, so I said, Nick, your tea's ready. I turned around, and when she didn't answer me, I saw the man there. He was very tall, very black, and I got the sense he was a man, and he was behind me in the prison room. And that was the very first day, and that was the start. And on that very first day, I thought to myself, oh my God, I've seen the dead since a child. I've always seen and heard them. And I just knew that for that to come the first day, basically I was going to be in trouble in the house. And then it just went from strength to strength to strength. And the first very big incident that happened was I'd come home from work one day. I went into the kitchen again to put the kettle on, and there I found a bit of A4 paper on the sides, just sitting on the sides, and I read it. And it was a death certificate of the man that hung himself in the house from the beam above the stairs 8 months previous. Now, after he hung himself, another owner brought it. They only lasted in the house 6 months, and then I brought it. So again, a quick succession of owners. And I read it, and he killed himself just before Halloween. And I thought, oh my God, where did Nicole find this? But what struck me about it was the paper didn't have a crease. It was absolutely perfect, as if it was brand new paper. So Nicole got in an hour or so later, and I said, oh, where did you find this? She'd never seen it before. Well, we absolutely panicked. So obviously the first thing you think is somebody's broken in the house, somebody's trying to scare us. Well, of course, we checked every window, every door, and there was nothing at all. So we had this death certificate, and we were showing everyone coming around the house was saying, look at this. It was only years later, after I'd left the house, the man's wife, who had killed himself, she contacted me, and she said, I've heard you said you had a death certificate. She said, well, you couldn't have done, because I've got the only copy. Anyway, cut a long story short, I said, you need to come around and talk to me. So she came around the house, and she was around for quite a few hours. And she said he'd had no other family. She was his only living relative. And she said when she found him hanging, she moved out of the house literally that day, never went back. And the death certificate was sent to her house weeks or months later. And I said to her, well, I'm telling you, you can ask this person, that person, this person, because she still lives in St. Joseph's now, and lots of the people she knew. And I said, I'm telling you, it was there. And that was the first thing that made me think, oh, my God, what? Because, of course, at the time, I understand now, I think it's called apporting, but I didn't realise that could happen. And, of course, all the time you look for rational explanations because you don't want to be living in a house like that. Right. So you always try and justify it, always try and rationalise it. Every single time I did that. But that was probably the first really unusual thing that happened. But the activity was constant. But like I say to people, the practical side of this was the electrics was always on. I'd come down in the morning to get ready for work, and the TV was on, the CD player was on, the kettle just boiled, all the lights are on. Now, the practical side was I'm paying the electric bills. Taps are always running. I'm paying the water bill on a meter. And so very early on, I thought to myself, Jesus, this is actually costing me a lot of money. And I know that sounds, you know, a bit weird to an extent, but when you do take on a mortgage and you have to pay it, you budget for these things. Mm-hmm. And it was also expensive as well, which is an unusual side of the story, but it was, because it was constantly every day.
Goodness. Yes, hammering away at your psyche and your very being. That's, oh golly, you're a very strong person.
Yeah. I know. I don't know how, but I do know how. I had no choice, because nobody would knock my door and say, "There, Vanessa, there's a couple of grand, go and move out." It just doesn't work like that in real life.
Right.
So I had to stay. Now, I again watch these movies and think to these haunted cases, and I think, well, why didn't you move out? And then I think to myself, well, of course you can't, because it's not as easy as that. Especially towards the end, I was a single parent, I had a baby, and you just can't move. You just don't have that money available.
Right.
To abandon a house. I had to in the end, because by the end of it, I thought it was either me or the house. It got that bad. So I had an offer to go and live with a friend in one room. There was a bedroom, and I took it, and I left my own home after 3 years, that the house I'd worked so hard to get a deposit for and to live in, and I tried to make it my own, but I couldn't make it my own. I was never going to be allowed to make it my own. So the whole experience was terrifying, but the last year and a half, it really ramped up. I mean, the activity really did ramp up, and it just didn't want me there. It got to the stage where I remember vividly, I got in from work one evening with my son. He was a few months old, and it started to snow, and I couldn't go in the house. I just thought, I can't go in the house. So I put him, he was only a baby, in my coat, and I leaned up against the brickwork outside the house, and I thought, I can't go through the door. And I had to in the end, because I was getting so cold and the snow had started to come. But I stood out there for 10, 15 minutes thinking, I can't go in. And then, of course, I had to.
Right.
But it's absolutely just horrific living like that. You can't, it affects everything in your life. It affects your brain, it affects your safety, because what can you do? You can't call the police. You can't do anything about it. And I looking back, and I didn't tell many people at the time, and the reason I didn't, people would have thought I'm mad. You know, blood splatters have appeared. Really, Vanessa? You know, I know what people would have said. So you kind of have to deal with it alone, to a big extent. I had a few close friends who knew what was going on in the house. But again, people wouldn't come and visit me. People refused to come to the house, because the friends I did have had bad experiences there. So I was practically there completely alone, with a baby, with a small baby who I was desperately trying to protect, and knew that I couldn't. I knew I couldn't protect him properly. It was actually down to him in the end, and his safety, why I did leave the house in the end, because I thought I just can't risk this anymore.
Sure. Now, did you ever try to have priests or holy men of any kind, of shamans, that type of thing, come in and cleanse it, clear it, bless it, however?
Well, I didn't have paranormal investigators, and the reason was I didn't want to know. I didn't want to say, right, you're living with 2 men, 3 women, some trapped children, a witch. I didn't want to hear any of that, because they couldn't have done anything. I didn't believe nothing could have been done. But I got the vicar in. One afternoon, I was sitting watching TV. Again, it was in the summer, it was daylight, and a man, he was only from the West up, and he was staring at me. He was floating across in the hallway. And it was a real time experience. He could see me, I could see him. He wasn't residual energy. He was there. And I felt then again, but with that one actually, again, I didn't feel he was threatening. He was just there. He was stuck in the house. So I went to the local vicar, who was actually on holiday for 3 weeks. So I had to wait 3 weeks for him to get back. And he came in and blessed the house. And when he first came in, he went upstairs, he looked in all the rooms. We went back down to the front room, we were talking, chatting. He got on his robes and his holy water. When we'd gone back upstairs, 20 minutes later, the bathroom taps running again, full pelt. Now, he did a blessing on the house, but it didn't work. Nothing made any difference at all, to be honest.
Goodness. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the cage is exerting its presence, its domain over you talking about cleansing it. My goodness. But we heard most of it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't believe. I mean, to be honest, I think, you know, we've had some very bad activity in there in the last year or so, demonic. And there's lots of photographs of what we've got lots of evidence of that. And I think that I have managed to find a couple of people who have actually managed to be able to clear that. House of those demences. Actually, it's an American called Ludwin and an American medium called Chris Fleming have actually helped move the house quite recently. The house is that pulsating thing, and you know the evil in there. But the house is still haunted. The house is still very much there with spirits, because they said, to be honest, they wouldn't go, and they have free will. They haven't gone. They basically kicked out the bad demonic energies. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the actual the spirits that haunt the cage, they're still there, and they said there's actually nothing really we can do, because you can't. They have free will. I don't believe the house will ever be completely cleared. I think it's a very, very special house and a very unique house, and it's just got itself trapped in layers and layers of history. Mm-hmm. And I think they don't want to go. They just want to be there.
It's very sad, very interesting, very sad, and very unfortunate for you. The abject misery that was done to people that were there, the women, the witches, the accused witches rather. I can't even imagine 13 people being in that small room, chained up possibly. It's just unfathomable to me. Golly.
Yeah, they were chained up, and of course a lot of them, especially Ursula, she was a single parent. Mm-hmm. She had a 6-year-old son. She knew she was going to be executed, and those women in there in that house, knowing they weren't going to see their children again, knowing they were being executed for no good reason. Mm-hmm. I mean, the misery and and they were tortured in there. There was lots of abuse in there.
Sure.
And you can just imagine, being a mother myself, there's nothing, there isn't anything worse than that. And I can understand the atmosphere in the house and the misery. It seeps into the walls, and it gets stuck in it, and time gets trapped there. And it's a shame, because it's the most prettiest, beautiful little cottage. It's such a lovely place to live. Anyone would want to live there. Anyone would want to be there. Mm-hmm. But the activity is positively blinding. I mean, you just be standing there and something just fly across the room in front of you. It's really, really active, and is to this day. The activity in the house hasn't dwindled at all. In fact, if anything, it's probably gotten worse. I think through the investigators that go there now, because it's open to public for paranormal investigators now, they go there, and I think they communicate more and more with the spirits in the house. Mm-hmm. And the spirits talk back. They don't shy away from it. They want to tell their story, and they want they want the attention, because otherwise I don't think they'd be there. I don't think they'd be so active if they didn't.
Right, they're possibly feeding off of the energies of just the people and the curiosity and human nature in general, I would imagine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because sometimes in there it's so active, it's absolutely terrifying. I've had seasoned investigators that have had a bad experience in there and fled literally after a couple of hours, and have said, well, hold on a minute, this is too much. This is too much for me. Mm-hmm. I want to have a nice haunted experience, not get stuff chucked at me. It's people have been attacked in there, people have been burnt, scratches, physical injuries. Mm-hmm. It's oh God, it's just so haunted. It's so unique. I'm interested in the paranormal, of course, especially since living in the house, and I've never heard of a story like it. I've never heard of a house that compares to this at all, and I mean that. You know, literally, this house is the worst.
Right. This is the top of the, like Richard had said. You know, about a 9 out of a 10 there on it.
I was going to say, Vanessa, real quickly, we might have discovered why the cage isn't selling. We might need to work on your salesmanship just a little bit.
Really? Think so? This is what you can't do. The thing is, it's a moral issue as well. You can't sell a property and allow kids to live in there, or anyone, or pensioners or anyone, and let them experience what I did. It's not fair and it's not right. Now, I want to sell the house because I've never been able to buy another house. I don't earn the type of money where I can just have another mortgage and get that type of deposit. So I'm still renting, 13, 14 years later. And I need the house to sell so I can move on with my life.
Right.
But I think the cage chooses its next owner. I think it's not down to me. It's down to God. And it's down to, the right person will have to buy this house because it's so special, it's so unique, and they're taking on something that they probably have no idea about, They won't realise how bad it is until they go there, but it has to be the right person. And I'm just going to have to suffer that and just wait for the right person. But what I can't do is start lying and saying, oh, no, it's fine. And even back then, years ago, I could have done that, and I thought, I can't, it's not fair. I mean, you could never have children in there, small children. You couldn't.
Your own sense of morality and right and wrong are kind of almost holding you back in selling the house. Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, it absolutely is, because I'm 44 years old and I've got a 8-month-old baby and a 9-year-old son. And I want to be able to get on with my life, but it doesn't seem to be my choice. It's completely out of my hands, all of this. And I hope it will sell to someone, but they need to understand it's a very, very special house and a very unique house and now a very famous house. So it's going to be a challenge for anyone, but the right person will come along sooner or later.
Absolutely, they will. And that area, golly, going back as far as 500 A.D., I mean, what happened to St. Osoph? Is that how I pronounce that? Is that correct?
Who's this?
Okay, thanks. St. Osoph, with the invaders coming in, and my gosh, it's just an area of woe.
I mean, we had the plague there, we had the Vikings raided, all the wars. I mean, the history of the village is phenomenal, and it's in the Doomsday Book. St. Osoph goes back when there are only three numbers in the year. I mean, that's how old it is. The buildings there, and the history that we know about. Mm-hmm. And it saw a lot of death and a lot of misery. And living in England in those days, it was anyway. You'd get hung for stealing a loaf of bread. And especially in St. Osoph, it's all priory land. It's like a huge. It looks a bit like a castle, but it's an old monastery, an old priory. And obviously, that was a target for the Vikings, and the village got burnt down loads of times and raped and pillaged. And, the history there is terrible anyway. So it's not the most safest of environments anyway, to be honest, the entire place, let alone topping it up with what happened there with the witch trials and, of course, the history of the cage as well.
Very, very interesting. Very, very sad, very tragic land. Golly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Would you like to tell us of another incident that is prevalent in your mind at the house?
Yeah, I had some friends come round. He was a sergeant major. He was on leave from Afghanistan at the time, and my friend Kirsty, she's a cancer nurse. She's actually a ward sister, and she runs all the ward for the chemotherapy and blood cancer. Mm-hmm. And they came round for a cup of tea again during the day. So they walked through the lobbyway. We went into the kitchen, made a cup of tea, came back and sat in the front room. Well, Neil, the sergeant major, then stands up and says, "Miss, what's all that blood over there?" Now, bear in mind, they just walked through this exact spot minutes before. And I kind of ignored him at first because I thought, well, there isn't any blood over there, because we would have noticed it when he walked in. He would have walked it through. He got up off his seat. He went over there. He called me and Kirsty over there. And there was blood splatters all over the hall. It was on wooden flooring from where he just walked in. Now, of course, what he does first of all, he's a sergeant major, he's checking the windows. Has a bird flown in that's dripping with blood? Did a cat get in that's been injured? You know, trying to work. He's feeling the walls. He's doing all this. And there was no explanation. Blood appeared all over the floor within minutes of them walking in and us sitting down. And the blood wasn't disturbed, so he certainly hadn't walked through it. But we'd only made a cup of tea. There was, you know, he did his investigations, you know, and he said, Ness, what the F is going on in your house? We couldn't. And the interesting thing, because Kirsty's a cancer blood nurse, she knew it was blood. And she actually had a go at him afterwards, and because he was touching the blood and rolling it in his fingers. And she said to him, why are you doing that? You're trained. You know you shouldn't touch blood without gloves on. So, you know, she knew it was blood because that's her job. I don't know where it came from this day. It appeared. Another terrible time was I was completely living in my bedroom all the time. And then one day I had to go downstairs because I'd run out of clothes. I had to do some ironing for clothes the next day because I'd sealed myself up in the bedroom for so long. I had no clothes left. So I thought, right, I've got to go down to the cage room where the ironing board was, and I've got to do the ironing. So I thought, right, I'll just do 2 or 3 things quickly. And for the first time, I left Jesse upstairs in the cot, because every time I was in the house, I took him from room to room with me because I knew the house wasn't safe to leave him on his own. But I thought, look, he's asleep. I'm going to be 5 minutes. I went downstairs, turned on the iron, started doing the ironing, and his little Thomas the Tank Engine toys, battery-operated toys, all started coming out from the corners of the rooms and going round my feet, round the ironing board. And I thought, and my initial reaction was anger with myself. Why did I come out of my room? Why did I come out of my room? So the first thing was anger, then it was absolute fear. So I quickly turned off the iron, legged it through the house, opened the little wooden door to get up the stairs, because you have to open a door and an old latch to get access to the stairs. As I'm just about to go up the stairs, there's a man standing at the top of the stairs. And he had on modern day clothes. He wasn't like the others. And he was standing right next to where Jesse's cot was. Oh, and that was, and I thought to myself, that was kind of the last big thing. Well, that was the thing that made me leave, actually, after 3 years of constant activity, because he was in between me and my son. And it was literally the first time I just thought, right, I've just got to go downstairs quickly. And I thought, this is ridiculous. I can't. I mean, I'd be in bed with him, the baby, and my door, there's iron latches on all the doors, you know, still old-fashioned, hundreds of years old latches. And it's shut in the bedroom and going bang, 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 bang. Now, when that's happening, you've got a small baby beside you. You can't get out of the door because the thing is behind the door. You're not going to jump out the window. And the fear, I can't explain to you the fear of that. It's sort of like a white heat. It's like a white fear. You know when they say your heart's pounding out your chest? Well, it almost does. Yes. And you can hear them coming up the stairs, then the latches. Doors were slamming, open, slam, open, slam. And there's no wind, there's no windows open, and again, of course, you try and think to yourself, right, it must be the wind. Well, it's not the wind, because you want it to be the wind. You want it to be because you're tired. You want it to be because there's a shadow and it was just a trick of the light. You want it to be all of those things. Nobody wants to live in a house like that with that type of activity, and I certainly didn't. But it was there were so many incidences. I was pushed. One morning I was brushing my teeth, getting ready for work. It was about 7:30 in the morning. I was bending over the sink in the upstairs bathroom, and I got hit so hard on my bum, I screamed. The toothpaste went in the air. I flew the toothbrush in the air. There was nobody there, and it hurt so much. This wasn't just a tap. This was a hard smash. I mean, how the hell? How can you tell anyone that? I never told anyone that for years. How can you go to work and say, "Oh, I just got smacked on the bum by a ghost"? You can't say stuff like that.
Right.
You just have to keep it in your own brain. And how can you say a blood splatter's turned up? I mean, the house is like worse than the Amityville house in America. This stuff happened. It absolutely. It was exhausting for me now remembering it, but it's just utterly exhausting living like that. It's horrible.
I'm of the opinion that you did the right thing then, and grabbing Jesse and getting out of there.
I had to, because I don't know if I'd have got out there alive otherwise. And I know that sounds a bit dramatic, but I don't care. But that's what it was. I mean, the guy that lived there the year before me, he didn't get out alive. And I believe, and I said this to his wife, I believe that if he'd have lived in a normal house, he wouldn't have done it. I think if he'd have lived in a 2 up, 2 down, or a flat or something like that, any other property, I believe there's something dark and evil in that house. I believe there was. I think it's probably gone now. Mm-hmm. But I believe there's something that basically encouraged him to do it, that whispered to do it, because I pretty much heard it myself in there. I had to get out. I had no choice. It was survival in the end. And of course now still skint because of it, and still with it around my neck, but that's better than still being there.
Sure. Your tale is, all of the thousands of miles between us. It has goosebumps raised on my arms. Ghost bumps, however you say that these days.
Yeah. I mean, like I said to people that, especially the skeptics, and I'm like, right, well, let me tell you something. Why would anyone leave their own home? Why would you leave your home, which was a beautiful cottage? I put every penny I had into it. I'm still paying the mortgage to it to this day. Mm-hmm. It's cost me, years and years and years, over 10 years of mortgage. I've had property I can't even live in. It doesn't make any sense. Nobody with a rational brain would do that. Nobody would leave their house. I had it decorated lovely. I had it the way I wanted it. Nobody would walk away from a property being, I bought that myself. That was my years and years of working 6 days a week, hard work to buy my dream house. Nobody would walk away from that unless you really absolutely had no other choice. And I didn't have any other choice. It was safety. I believe it was our lives at stake, and that might sound over the top, but I don't care, because that's what it was.
Horrifying. Richard, would you like to tell us some of your experiences there?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So, as it began with the first EVP that you played for your listeners, mm-hmm. Our first night in the cage was fairly quiet, which was nice. It was a chance to settle in and just get used to the place, and also get over some jet lag. But Leslie, one of the 2 English investigators that came along, was sitting in a chair by the window, just minding her own business. Excuse me. And after about 20 minutes, this is really the first half an hour of her experience paranormal investigating. You know what I mean? She'd never done it before. And she made the mistake of saying, "Oh, I'm a little bored, to be honest. I wish something would happen." Which is a great way to tempt fate. And then a few minutes go by, and then all of a sudden she sat bolt upright in the chair and went absolutely stiff as a board, clutching at the chair as if she's either in immense pain or terrified. And she went, "Oh, God, I've gone cold. Freezing cold." And then she began to cry. And I've known Leslie for many years. She's not a dramatic person. She's not driven to theatrics. And she was crying and said, "I've just gone cold all over, and now I feel incredibly sad, and I don't know why." And tears were just running down her face, which, now, it's a completely subjective experience. So being skeptical, you would say, you're in a location like the cage, you know the history of it. It would be very easy to let your imagination run away with you.
Sure.
But I interviewed other investigators who had never met Leslie. She's never met them. I interviewed another team of investigators from the UK that had taken the cage for an evening, and one of them had exactly the same experience in exactly the same chair. And what fascinates me also is that Vanessa just told you her experience upstairs in the bathroom. Well, they'd also had some pretty sinister experiences up in the same bathroom. So the commonality of those kind of experiences, I've been tracking those across multiple witnesses, and that fascinates me.
Yes.
So Leslie going completely cold, she would go with Caroline and step outside. Leslie would go outside for a smoke break, and Caroline would keep her company. The alleyway which runs behind the cage is known as Coffin Alley because it's where undertakers would take the coffins of those to be buried from the undertaker to the churchyard. So, it's a little bit spooky at night. Mm-hmm. But on this particular occasion, Leslie went outside alone. The back door of the cage slammed itself closed on her. Nobody else was within touching distance of it. There was no wind. There was no breeze. We spent a lot of time trying to debunk that, and we weren't able to. So those were the first two instances, and then we bring some of the more.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Then we bring some. Everyone's a critic, huh?
Yeah.
Then we bring some of the more traditional tools into play, like the Ouija board. So we're conducting Ouija board sessions, and we make contact with what claims to be an entity called Redfast, which is a nonsensical name. Who would be called Redfast? But we were getting the story of this man who had supposedly been a local shepherd, hadn't lived at the cage, hadn't had any connection with witchcraft at all. But as I think Vanessa has already mentioned, the land around the cage was priory land, and you have a priory across the street, and so he claimed to be a shepherd at this priory. And after the session, I did some research. It turned out that a few hundred years ago, Red Fast was the way you would call a nickname for somebody who was very red in the face. A kind of a jolly Santa Claus kind of red-faced man, which was something that I'd never known, and nor had any of us that were engaged in the session. So yeah, we had a very lively time there at the cage, and a lot of those experiences are documented in the book itself.
Yes, they are. Go out and buy it. It'll be available in September, I believe it is. Spirits of the Cage.
September in the U.S. and October in the U.K.
Okay, fantastic.
Just in time for Halloween.
Absolutely.
Well, of course it will be. That's the best time for these kinds of stories.
I think you're absolutely right. And Vanessa, I know, had her own Halloween party go a little bit off the rails in the cage, right, Vanessa?
Yeah. Me and Nicole had a Halloween party because we didn't want to be on our own in the house. We didn't want to. We kind of wanted the day and the night to go by with fun rather than, the horrific stuff we were living with. We were upstairs getting ready, and we'd heard the door go downstairs. I'd heard the door go downstairs. I was getting ready in my bedroom. I'd heard the door go. I'd heard there's two doors. The door at the bottom of the stairs. I'd heard a massive, great big slam, so I ran out of my bedroom and I was shouting down the stairs, Nicole, what are you doing? Why are you slamming the door? Get it off its bloody hinges type thing. And as I'm screaming down the stairs, she's come up behind me. She wasn't even in her bedroom. She was in her bedroom. She wasn't even downstairs. We went downstairs to think, a guest has come early. No, the door was locked. Nobody had come early. And then later on, the man again, another incident in the bathroom, was standing behind me. You could see him in the mirror in the bathroom. That night, we just literally, we slept together that night actually as well. Many nights we had to. But I just want to say, there's lots of people that have come up to me since. One girl came up to me and she said, are you Vanessa joining the cage? And I said, yeah. She said, I was driving, again, she was a nurse, and she said, I was driving to work the other morning. She said, I have to go past your house. She said, I know it was 10:15, so I was 15 minutes late. And she said, I looked up, and there was a lady standing at the top window. And she said, I stopped the car, and I literally stared at her. And she said, and I said, what does she look like? And she said, well, I'm a nurse, I work with dead people. She said she looked dead. She was very thin, very gaunt. She even described her hair. And she said, did you have anyone there that night? And I said, no. Another lady came up to me and she said she was driving past the house with her friend, and her friend said, "I thought your mate's house is supposed to be haunted." And then Mari said, "Well, yeah, it is." She said, "Well, how come she's got a mannequin of a woman standing looking out the top window then? Why is she doing that? Because it looks pathetic. If it's haunted, why would she have a mannequin at the top window?" Well, of course, there's never been a mannequin at the top window. But so many normal people who aren't interested in the paranormal world have experiences, and see things at the cage and outside the cage. Just by going by. Most people in the village now, they cross the road. They don't walk past it. They'll cross the road to avoid it.
Well, Vanessa, this is Travis. I was going to ask you. I mean, we've heard your stories of what's taken place. We've heard Richard's. Do the townspeople, do they have their own stories or their own biases against the house?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have seen things. I say a lot of the villagers now won't walk past it. A lot of people have seen the lady. I've actually never seen her. I'd love to see her. I've never seen her. I think it's such a legendary place now. But I don't really remember there being much talk of the cage before I moved in. Having said that, I lived away for years. Mm-hmm. I didn't really know that it had a bad reputation at that point. I think if I had have done, I may not have brought it. I probably wouldn't have brought it. So yeah, I mean, it comes because people are. One lady, she said to me, she's an old lady, and she said, why have you changed that house? And I said, what do you mean? She said, you had it lovely. She said, it was a little museum. She said, with all the old-fashioned clothes hanging by the fire and all the shelves. And she was describing this house. I said, oh, sorry, you've got the wrong house. That's not my house. And she was quite an angry lady. She was a Londoner that had moved to St. O's for retirement. And she kind of said to me, don't mug me off, love, in this kind of language. I know what I've seen. I looked through your window and I saw you had it like a museum. And she was describing that was hanging by the fire, the clothes. Well, it's never, ever, ever been like that. And so it made me think that somewhere time got trapped, time eclipsed, and she was quite angry with me because she thought that I was saying you're mad, and I wasn't. I'm just saying it's never been like that. And she said, I know what I saw. I know what I saw. And she was describing to me the entire front room. Well, it's never been like that. I don't know what happened. It was an eclipse of time or something, but the house is just... So things like that, of course, with locals, that does spread, and people do talk about it. Mm.
Now, Richard, from your perspective, going in as an investigator, did you interview the locals as well to find out if they had stories?
So I didn't specifically sit down and interview locals, but everywhere I went, I would ask them. So I would go to the corner shop, to go get some supplies, or we would go out to eat at night. We'd go for a curry in one of the restaurants and stuff. And people are polite everywhere, and those is a tourist town during the summer, but not so much in January. So, they would say, oh, what are you doing? You're obviously not local. And I'd say the cage. And I would say the reaction was split. Some of them would say, as I think say the cage, yeah, we've heard about the haunted house. We think it's all overblown. It's all rubbish. And to which my answer was, probably spend the night with us then. Some of them took me up on it. But the others would say, oh yeah, you wouldn't get me in that place after dark, or they would say, we crossed the street to avoid that place. They won't even walk on the same side of the street as the cage. And more than a few of them had their own friend of a friend stories about the location. So I think opinion seems to be split among the local folks. I don't know if that's what you found, Vanessa, between those that are rather afraid of the location of the cage and those that really just won't believe it no matter what you put in front of them.
Well, of course, you're always going to get skeptics, and a lot of people out there still to this day do not believe in anything paranormal at all, and say, oh, it's all a load of rubbish. They're the people who will never even open their minds to even thinking it is. They poo-hoo it, they dismiss it out of hand, and a lot of people are like that. I've got members of my own family like it. They just cannot conceive of there being life after death and hauntings. It's just not in their brain to understand that. And of course, people like that are always going to say it's rubbish because they won't even give themselves an opportunity to believe or experience it for themselves. So, but it is what it is. People, some people are like that.
Absolutely.
And I think that This is one of my soapboxes, and I'll try to stay off it, but skeptic is a word that gets a bad rap. Skeptics are basically people that are open-minded, but they'll say, show me the evidence, what's the proof? And that's very different from flatly refusing to believe, full stop. So a true skeptic will do their legwork. And I would challenge anyone that says that this kind of thing doesn't happen, go spend a night in a location like that. It's very easy to be full of disbelief and mocking this kind of stuff at noon. So right now, we're coming up on midday. I'm in a bright room, the sunlight's streaming through the windows. It's very easy to laugh this kind of stuff off. But it looks very different at night when you're on your own in a location like that, knowing its history, when the house really does start to come alive. It's a whole different kettle of fish, and you really are forced to confront your beliefs in that kind of environment. So I really respect the opinions of those who disbelieve after having done their homework first, after having actually been and put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, I was going to say, my experience has been, and I think this is true whether you're talking the paranormal, whether you're talking religion, whether you're talking politics, you have people that are believers of one end of the spectrum, and that's because either they have had their experiences and they believe, or they disbelieve because they haven't had an experience. The skeptic is more the objective person that falls kind of in the middle that says, I haven't had anything either way. I'm open to seeing evidence. I'm open to seeing proof of the argument that you're making.
Yeah, and a good investigator is a skeptic.
Yes.
But a good investigator is one that tries to find an explanation. And having done this for 22 years, I've run into more than my share of instances where I've ruled out all of the mundane, everyday explanations, the construction defects and the drafts and things like that. And you simply take a case like the cage, you can't apply mundane explanations to a lot of the activity that goes on there. So at that point, you're forced to conclude there's something going on we don't understand. And that really is it. But I think skeptic is a term that's gotten hijacked. It all goes back to the X-Files, in my opinion. Agent Scully sees how many alien invasions, but still manages to write them off as. I mean, that's not good investigation or good thinking either, is it? No. There comes a point. And it's a lot easier when you investigate this stuff because the more haunted locations you end up staying in, the more you're exposed to it, and the more it challenges that worldview of, everything is nice and cozy. This is the 21st century. We live in the information age, and we're talking about spirits from the 16th century. So
Absolutely.
It's very a lot of people find that very hard to believe that in an age of plasma televisions. I'm sorry, I just showed my age there, I guess. In an age of these, that's the high-def TVs and instantaneous communication over the internet, it seems like there's no real place for spirits of those accused unjustly of witchcraft to still be walking the earth. And yet, again, if you really want to challenge that view, go spend a night in the cage. I dare you.
So
no, thank
I
you
would
very
actually take
much.
you up. No, I would actually take you up on it just for the fun of it. I really would.
I will cheer you on from over here in my chair.
I know you would. Now, I have a twofold question for you, Richard, and one is based on very early in the book. One of the little occurrences that was started out as an annoyance for Vanessa, but became much more of a problem, was the faucet being turned on in the bathroom so that the water was constantly running. And I made a notation in the book that, and I've talked to many people who have had hauntings in their homes, and that seems to be kind of a practical joke that spirits or residual energy likes to play. They enjoy turning water on and off. In this particular instance, especially the age of the building for the cage, what immediately jumped out to me was, well, could the spirits not just be fascinated with the fact they could turn on a knob and there is running water in this house? Vanessa's the witch. That's who's the real witch here. She's brought witchcraft into this building.
That's interesting. You mean from their perspective, she brought in this, and the same would be true of the technology when she would have her TV and her CDs turning themselves on. I've never actually considered that, but it's an interesting point, isn't it? I think a lot of the time with faucets turning themselves off and on, and we get that in lots of cases, it's fairly common. My suspicion is that in some cases, it may be premonitory, but I think a lot of it is spirits trying to say, hey, I'm here, pay attention to me.
Right.
And you can spend a very small amount of energy in turning a tap or a faucet in order to get a very strong, visible result. You know,
Yeah.
I investigated an orphanage 50 miles outside of Denver, a former orphanage that's now a private school. I investigated that location, and that was one of the most common phenomena they were getting, faucets turning themselves off and on. And the majority of the entities there were supposed to be the ghosts of children that had died during the tuberculosis era in this particular orphanage. So you've got taps that children could reach on sinks and didn't take a lot of effort to turn. And you got this very visible flow of water. So, yeah, I think it's a case probably of the entity saying, hey, I'm here, you're not paying attention to me, but I am here.
Right. Pay attention. Now, the second part of that question was in reference to this woman that Vanessa had come up to her and talk about, how disappointed she was that she had changed the decor on the inside just from looking in. That's not really the type of experiences that you have with a lot of haunted places, outsiders looking in and glimpsing the previous history of the home, hundreds of years. Did you find that a unique story?
Well, the time slip phenomenon is fairly ubiquitous, isn't it? It goes back to probably the most common example is the Garden of Versailles experience, which has been fairly well documented, and attempts have been made to debunk that and explain it away, of course. But time slips are not that uncommon. What is interesting, though, is that the lady never... this wasn't somebody who was looking through a window and expecting to see anything. She looked through a window and was presented with a very different image than what was actually there. So when we talk about ghost sightings, it never ceases to surprise me how many of them occur in people that weren't expecting to experience the paranormal. They weren't thinking about ghosts. They weren't thinking about anything that wasn't mundane. And it seems as though the pattern of thought, the brain gets into a certain mode of relaxation when it's more open to perceiving these kind of images. So I think what we probably had, and hopefully she's not listening, was a slightly nosy lady that wanted to, wanted to stick her head through and see what was going on inside this reputed house, and she saw, something which nobody else has seen. If she were prone to making up stories or anything like that, you'd be much more likely to hear her talk about seeing, people chained up in there or something scary. But what she described was fairly mundane. It just didn't track with what was actually there.
But she was angry at me. When I told her that it wasn't a museum, I'd never had anything like that, she thought that I was being rude to her, as if, and I wasn't. And she was angry, and she was really put out and really offended. I told her it was never like that. And her reaction was hostile to some degree. That's not somebody who wants to make something up, because she'd have said to me, can I come in the house? Can I have a look? She didn't say any of that. She had a go at me because she thought I changed the house. And when she saw it looked like a museum, she thought it was lovely. She'd gone and looked at it another time, and it was normal and more modern, and she couldn't understand why I'd done it.
And it's very much like you were talking about the mannequin in the upstairs window. People driving by, and you've got this from multiple drivers, don't you? People driving by just automatically assume, the lady that owns the haunted house is trying to add a bit of atmosphere with a Halloween decoration. Not one of them actually concluded, I'm looking at an apparition from a time gone by. Right. So and again, these are all people. I can't speak for you, but when I'm driving to work, my brain's in neutral. I'm not thinking about ghosts or anything like that. My mind's kind of relaxed. So we're in that state again, I think, where we're more open to perceiving this kind of stuff.
Very possibly. Yeah, I kind of consider myself a skeptical believer in the fact that I do believe, but a lot of times I don't. I think sometimes people's imaginations take over and whatnot, and quite possibly that's what happened with the village lady who she wanted to see that, so that's what she saw. Who knows?
Maybe that's the case. It would seem odd to me, though, that you would think up an image of a museum. If it was your imagination and it's the witch house,
Right.
I think you're far more likely to look in there and say, Oh, I see chains hanging from all the walls. I see, all those kind of things. I see a prison, not a museum.
She was describing shelves to me and objects on shelves, and she was annoyed that I'd taken all the shelves down because they were interesting to her, all the old objects on the shelves. And, well, of course, none of that was there, but I think Richard's right. If you're that type of brain, you're going to see hangman nooses or hear witches cackling or chains rattling. And she didn't. She saw an eclipse of time that it would have been. It would have looked like that 200-300 years ago. She was a lucky lady. She didn't realise it. She still thought I lied. I'm sure she walked away thinking that I completely lied to her and I did have it like that, and I just didn't want to tell her the truth. But of course, she was the one that had the experience, and she's lucky to have it. Although she probably wouldn't. She would never believe what she saw, probably.
Right, completely oblivious of the specialness of it.
Yeah, she just said to me, I've changed it and not told her,
Now, have you been accosted by any other villagers, locals, neighbors?
I actually get quite a lot of messages by people. I don't go in the village much anymore. And with a baby, of course, I haven't really been out in the evenings for a long time. But I get a lot of messages by people who are tourists or had heard of the house or have seen something at the house, then asked around and realised it is a haunted house, and then contacted me. Yeah, it happens a lot. A lot of people see things, hear things. I get sent a lot of photographs. I got sent photographs at the end of May of some really disturbing, something weird looking out of one of the windows. And that was just a lady just going by taking pictures. It was only days later she'd actually looked at her camera and saw the things looking through the window. So I get that quite a lot, to be honest.
And speaking about passing by, one thing we haven't discussed is the odd effects the house seems to have on cars. We had a car spin out and lose control and crash into the front of the cage just last year. And I also spoke to another witness that her car flatly refused to work after she parked it outside the cage, and they ended up rebuilding her entire engine block on a brand new BMW.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, that happens a lot. Don't, if you've got an electric car or one that's you can't park it near the cage. It's happened so many times, and people are angry at me, but there's nothing I can do about it. You turn the key, nothing works. The lights don't on the entire electric. It happens so many times, but yeah, 55 map. This guy. I don't know how he must have done a complete 360 in the road to get into the house to crash straight through the house. But again, there were rumours that he'd seen something and shocked him, and he'd just driven straight into the house. I mean, it's a straight road. I don't know how it happened, but these stories come to me all the time, and I bet you if I went back to the village next week, I'd hear another 5 or 6 stories.
Very interesting and very almost frightening to be around there. But that they blame you for it is that's silly. Yeah, how could that possibly be your fault? I know. I think a lot of it is fear and frustration. With the car, it's definitely frustration. So don't forget, it costs a lot of money to get your cars repaired. Yeah. And I think it's anger, and everyone always needs someone to blame. But, yeah. Right. Take your frustrations out on the person right in front of you instead of the apparition you saw in front of you.
Yeah. You can't fly at a ghost. You can't never go at a ghost. That's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, Travis, I dare you. I dare you to go over there and spend the night. And
Travis, I'll give you the keys, and I'll meet you at the door, and then I'll let you go in, and you can experience it yourself. I'll be in the pub next door.
You know
Wait.
what?
There you go. Well, yeah. I'll come out for the pub. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. There's your true friendship. Meet you at the pub. You do the house alone. Yeah, I see. Okay.
That's how it works. Yeah.
Now, Richard, do you have any plans of taking a group back to the cage?
It's not something I've talked about doing. I would do it in a heartbeat. To me, it's all down to getting enough time off work and holiday days. My vacation days are spread so thinly. But I would love to do it one day, and I would like to go see Vanessa again and kind of see where this story goes, because she has people visiting the cage all the time. She has a fairly constant stream of witnesses going in, and they're all having experiences. So this tale's really not done yet. I'm interested in seeing where it goes if she keeps it for another 10 years. Hopefully that didn't just send a chill down her spine. Or if she ends up selling it to another owner. This won't stop if she sells it to somebody else, by the way. So it would have to be somebody that understood what they were taking on, as Vanessa has said. And even then, I hope they keep tracking the reports that happen. I think that 10 years from now, there'll be way more of this story to tell, and I'm interested in reading it, if not writing it myself.
Very cool.
Might be interesting to...
You never know. I mean, if I ever make a movie of it, I might not have to sell it. It might just be that I'm supposed to keep it. I might just have to be the owner. But, of course, it's always down to money, like everything. And I do want to, you know, buy my own house. So you never know. It could work out that I have to keep it, because if I had enough money to buy another house, of course I wouldn't sell. I'd probably keep it, to be honest, because I think these things are fate, and if I'm meant to keep it, I will. But obviously on a practical level, I want to rent for the rest of my life because it costs a fortune, and I'm paying to, you know, rent and a mortgage. So again, practically, it's a...
No, I understand that. I do. So now, Richard, as far as other projects that you are working on as an investigator and as an author, what can we expect to see coming down the pipe?
I've got a very full boat at the moment, Travis. I'm finishing a book about the Denver Botanic Garden haunting. In Denver, they built the Botanic Gardens on an old cemetery, Cheeseman Park.
Well, that wasn't smart. That wasn't smart.
Well, you've seen the movie Poltergeist, the original, Spielberg's version, the good one.
The good one, right.
There's a great line in that about, you SOB, you moved the headstones, but you didn't move the bodies. When they built the housing development, that's actually what happened in Denver. So that particular building, the Botanic Gardens, is built upon thousands and thousands of graves. So I was given permission to go in and investigate that location. Then I'm writing the book on another extremely haunted house in the UK, the Black Monk House, 30 East Drive in Pontefract. I moved in there for a week and investigated that and got to the bottom of that haunting a little bit. It's a fascinating case. And then the Spirits of Fox Hollow Farm in Indianapolis. It's a home that was owned by the I-70 Strangler, a serial killer who murdered a lot of men in his basement and then left their bodies to rot in the woods out back. I investigated that location, and I'm writing that book also. So I'm pretty busy.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, and Cammie and I are working on the next Asylum 49 book also. I moved back in there for Halloween week with a team of investigators.
Also, now, this past Halloween, or that you're going in this Halloween?
I go every Halloween, so this would be my third year there. So we'll be moving.
That's
we
right.
also moved in for a week in February when the nursing home part was brand new. The nursing home was formerly off limits to investigators because it had residents in it. But now they've moved to a new facility, so they opened up the nursing home, and so we actually lived on site in the. I lived on the old, appropriately enough, palliative care ward, the ward where patients would spend their last days. We lived in rooms there and investigated for a week. And we'll be doing that again over Halloween as we work on the second Asylum 49 book.
Very cool. Looking forward to that one as well.
Thank you.
And Vanessa, what about you? Has the author bug bitten you? Are you looking at doing more writing? Telling more stories?
Yeah, I am. I'm actually writing a second book as we speak, and it tells about the cage in the years since I've left it, which of course the first one didn't. So I'm continuing the story because, as Richard quite rightly said, the story isn't told yet. There's still lots of the story that hasn't been told yet because the story's still going on now, today. So I've enjoyed it immensely with Richard and learnt a lot from him actually through the book. So I'm just carrying on with it because I think it's one of those stories you're going to read it and you're going to want to know what happens in the end because there's no ending to it. And we may find an ending one day, but I doubt it. But we've got a lot of there's years and years that haven't been written about, So, we dug up the floors in the cage to try and find out, we found the human bones, all stuff like that isn't written down yet, so isn't out there yet. So I'm just carrying on with the story. I want people to know it's important. People know what can happen, to be honest. So hopefully, and the same as Richard, really, I would love to do what Richard does, actually, to investigate these places. It's funny, I'm scared of my own house, but I'm not other haunted locations. So I envy Richard and what he does, especially the Fox Hollow Farm. I'd love to be an investigator and go out and go to these locations as well. So, again, in the pipeline, maybe one day I'll do that.
Very cool. Yeah, it's kind of, it's nice to be able to go investigate a place that has paranormal activity, but when you come home, you don't want that stuff going on there.
No.
It's
supposed to be your sanctuary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. Everybody needs their safe place, their safe zone.
Yeah.
Travis, they're getting a pool together to send you over to England.
They are. Who's they?
People in the chat room.
Oh, are they?
Or else that was a bet. It might have been a bet how long you'd last. I'm not sure.
I'll do it. I'm game.
Travis, that's what the newspaper reporter said that didn't make it past midnight.
Well, I've just got to do... So basically, I just have to stay longer than a British journalist. I think I got this.
Well, we'll have to be more specific about which journalist.
Famous last words if ever I've heard them.
That's
exactly,
true.
Yes.
That is very true. That is very true. I have had my experiences in some very haunted locations here in the U.S. And I've said this on several of the shows. I don't really consider myself a paranormal investigator. I'm more of a paranormal researcher. I love the stories. I love the history behind the stories. I don't really go expecting or looking for something to happen. But it's been kind of fun on those few instances where things have happened and they have occurred. But no, I'm very serious. I'm actually very open to visiting the cage. I think it would be a very interesting. I've never been to England, so I would love to come, and it would be an interesting overnight stay. And I do have some vacation time stored up, and I got to do something with it, or I'm going to lose it. So.
Well, come. You're more than welcome. It'd be lovely to see you.
Yeah, and hopefully the spirits think the same.
Yeah.
So Wendy, tell the chat room, get the pool going.
Okay. Do you want haunted forest? Because this is how it happens.
Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. We'll organize that up.
I'll broadcast live. I'll do a live feed. I'll broadcast. It'd be great.
Oh, too funny. I believe the spirits of the cage have already asserted their opinion on live broadcasts.
Yes, they have, as a matter of fact. Yes. Which happens quite a bit.
It does, really, yeah.
It does. More often than not, that happens when you start talking about the... especially if you're at the location or near the location. They do not like it at all. So Spirits of the Cage comes out September here in the U.S., October in the U.K. Richard, the next of your books that's going to be available, when will that be?
That will be Spirits of the Cage, in fact. That's the next one.
Okay, I mean after that. I'm sorry. I mean after that one is released, when will be the next one that we can look forward to?
After that, we'll be looking at 2017. 2018, get my years mixed up. After that will be 2018. The next one that has a definite date set, because publishers work either a year or 2 years in advance. The next set date is going to be for September of 2018, and that book is These Haunted Hallways, which I've already turned in, and that's the sequel to In Search of the Paranormal. So that covers 10 of my cases throughout the past 22 years in some of Britain and America's most haunted houses.
Very cool. We will have to get a copy of that and get you on to discuss that one as well.
Would be a pleasure.
Now, Vanessa, if someone were looking to get you in for an interview or something, how would they get a hold of you?
Just my email address, or on Facebook, or text, or email's the best way, really. But yeah, I'm willing to talk to anyone, go anywhere. You know, I could do the interviews. Yeah, I'm quite happy to. You know, I'm hoping to come to America. I'm saying to Richard, I want somebody to want me on a TV show in America or a chat show out there. I can come and talk about it. I've done lots of TV shows here in the UK. I've done 16 now. And I want to tell my story properly in America. So I'm just waiting on that. Somebody that wants to, you know, hear and talk about it firsthand.
We'll put that out to the universe and hope that it answers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, Travis, do you have any more questions?
No, I mean, we've had a great dialogue. We've covered a lot of the book. And a lot we didn't. There's a lot in there that we didn't cover, and intentionally so. We want you to buy this book, and it is available here in the U.S. In September through Llewellyn Publishing. I'm assuming through Amazon.com and other retailers, correct, Richard?
That's correct. It's on Amazon.com. It's in the brick and mortar bookstores like Barnes and Noble, pretty much everywhere.
So, and I know I speak for myself and Wendy, even though Wendy will say, don't speak for me, that it is a great book. It's something you're going to want to pick it up, and it is a very, very enjoyable read. There are moments where it's very intense, very frightening, but it's a very enjoyable, very entertaining read. So definitely recommend Spirits of the Cage by Richard Estep and Vanessa Mitchell.
Definitely. And with that, we're running out our clock here. So any final words from you two?
I would like to thank you for having this visit today.
No, thank you, Richard. Real quickly, Richard, why don't you give folks the way they can get in touch with you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I will. And apologies, that's my bad. Vanessa was supposed to go first. Come see me online at richardestep.net. Shoot me an email at richard@richardestep.net.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and if anyone would like to contact me, my email address is vanessa56roman@hotmail.co.uk. And really, I just hope people buy the book and enjoy it, you know, and just understand it.
I think it's very understandable, and hopefully it brings enough interest in that, heck, maybe you could even get more interest in someone buying the house.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, of course.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you both again so much for joining us on this special edition of Mystic Moon Cafe.
Thank you.
It has been a pleasure. Yes. Wednesday night, we'll be back at our regular time, 9 p.m. Eastern to 11 p.m. Eastern, and we are going to be talking with Alta and Chad Dillard, the authors of Or Abducted in the French Quarter. Very interesting book. They'll be our guests 9 o'clock on Wednesday evening. Join us for that show as well.
Yes, please do. And then Travis has to get back out there and attract a few more guests in.
Yes, I'm working on it. We'll see what we can do.
But it's hard to top you guys, though. This is a fantastic story. You all tell it so well as well. I'm completely impressed and hope you'll come back on with us at some point.
Happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your Sunday.
Yes.
You too. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. So, Wendy,
Cheerio.
what are we going? Cheerio.
Oh.
What are we going?
Bye.
What are we going out with, Wendy?
I've got Shaman's Harvest, The Devil in Our Wake.
Well, he always is.
Exactly. All righty.
Sounds good. See you guys Wednesday evening, 9 p.m. Eastern.
Hope y'all enjoyed the show. Thank you.
I'll survive in this one. Here it comes, the mistakes of history. Well, all for the sake of a foreign glory. We left the devil in our wake. After there's nothing left to take. We left the devil in our wake. Now that the boots are gone, your war has just begun. What flag do you raise under this sun? Gather what's left of your friends and family. Try to find some shade beneath these burning trees. We left the devil in our wake. After there's nothing left to take. This devastation is from crushing under. Unholy thunder is your fate. We left the devil in our wake. From left to right, none speak truth. There's a blood red hand and it's choking you. Sin is all on the face of men. My end is bad deeds. We left the devil in our wake. After there's nothing left to take. This devastation is from crushing under. Unholy thunder is your fate. We left the devil in our wake.
Thank you for joining us tonight. You've been listening to Mystic Moon Cafe. Join us every Wednesday from 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. On behalf of Wendy Schindler, this is Travis Short saying have a great rest of your week.